we recommend using a headphone for our podcast. We also recommend you turn off the light in your room and be alone. It will give you the best experience through the paranormal universe. Originally, the name Derby Gaol referred to 3 separate prisons in Derby. Today, only Friar Gaol still remains, and it has been transformed into a small but interesting tourist attraction. The basement of the building still holds some of the original cells, and both the cells and the garden are extremely haunted. Before Derby Gaol was built, Derbyshire itself had no prison. The criminals were sent to Nottingham Castle, a place feared for its harsh conditions. People referred to Nottingham Castle as hell on earth. In 1652, the first of the Derby prisons was built. This prison was named Cornmarket Gaol. Cornmarket Gaol no longer exists today. This was the site of the imprisonment of George Fox. The charge against him was blasphemy. He was the founder of the Religious Society of Friends, also known as the Quakers. Friargate Gaol, or Old Derby Gaol, was built in 1756, and it still exists today, though the building has been divided into several pieces. After it was closed in 1846, it was converted to the Howard Hotel and later other commercial businesses. But luckily, some of the original cells in the basement have remained intact. The doors, for instance, are original and they have historical graffiti on them. Derby Gaol was much larger than it is today, but the part that is still there is definitely worth the visit. In 1843, Vernon Street Prison, or the new county jail, was constructed. The frontage of this prison can still be seen today, but the building has been redeveloped for modern commercial use. This is where the last public execution in Derby took place. This was the execution of Richard Thorley for the murder of Eliza Morrow in 1862. In 1886, Vernon Street Prison was renamed HMP Derby. This jail was eventually closed for normal criminals in 1919 and turned into a military prison until 1929. Vernon Street Prison was the last of the Derby prisons, and after it was closed in 1919, criminals were once again sent off to Nottingham Castle, where they would be imprisoned in the notorious Victorian Sea Wing, nicknamed Beirut by the residents. Derby Gaol was a jail and not a prison. There is a difference between these two. A jail was a place of holding, of imprisonment. A prisoner simply had to wait for the verdict. Verdicts were given 4 times a year, in the winter, in the spring, in the summer, and in the autumn. If you were lucky, your turn was quick. If the assizes had just been, you'd have to wait. Derby Gaol cells were very small and dark. They are below street level, so no windows, and up to 6 people had to stay crammed in one cell. Men, women, children, and elderly people. Many succumbed to illness, suicide, and murder. Some were murdered because the jacket they owned was better than the one his or her cellmate owned. And many were hanged, thanks to the Bloody Code. An act with the charming name the Bloody Code was established in the 17th century. This act said that anyone, regardless of how minor the offense, could be executed. Most executions were performed by hanging. In the whole of Britain, 220 people were hanged for their crimes because of the Bloody Code. 56 of them were hanged at Derby Gaol. Between 1735 and 1825, Nuns Green was used for executions. Any tree here could serve as a gallows. Nuns Green was the early name of Friargate, and the gallows were in the backyard of the building. It is said that this yard is also haunted by the people who were hanged there. Today, a replica of the gallows stands here. The person who was facing his hanging would spend his last night in the condemned room. People rather killed themselves than be hanged in public. This room was once the scene of double suicide by 2 brothers who would have been hanged the next day. Their bodies were found hanging in the condemned room near the door, facing each other. Graffiti on the door of the condemned room shows images of hanging people drawn by those who face the same in the morning. Back in the day, prisons were privately owned. The people who worked at them didn't get paid by the government. They were paid by the prisoners. Prisoners even had to pay cuff money if they were released. That was the prize for getting their cuffs off. The murder room is where the former police museum used to be located. The murder room is also where dead prisoners were dissected. A surgeon used to live on number 44 and he was allowed to do whatever he wanted with the hanged prisoners. This, of course, was against all facets of religion. Perhaps this is why Derby Gaol is so haunted today. The most famous executions at Derby Gaol were the executions of the Pentrich martyrs. This was a group of men who had attempted a badly planned revolution against the Tory government. In October 1817, 35 men were tried for high treason. 3 of these men, including leader Jeremiah Brandreth, were sentenced to being hanged, drawn, and quartered, a death sentence that hadn't been applied for over a century. Even Prince Regent thought this was kind of cruel, and he changed the sentence to being hanged and beheaded afterward. This gruesome act was performed at the jail on November 7, 1817, with many people present. The beheading happened 30 minutes after their hanging. The 32 other men were sentenced to prison, ranging from 6 months up to life, and some were transported outside of England, to penal settlements in Australia. There is evidence that the prisoners even back then were afraid of the spirits that haunted Derby Gaol. All the original doors are marked with so-called witch marks. These marks look like a big W but are actually 2 V's close together. These marks stand for the Virgin Mary and are a symbol of fending off evil spirits. And the prisoners had every reason to fear the spirits of the jail because they were with many. According to the owner of the museum, Richard Felix, Derby Gaol is a very haunted place. Everybody leaves it with a paranormal experience. Footsteps are heard throughout the entire jail and in the upstairs area, which is where number 44 used to be. This is where the surgeon used to live. Doors open and close on their own accord, people are being touched and the smell of flowers is pretty strong in the debtor's room. Shadow figures have been seen both inside the jail and outside. It is believed that a hangman haunts Derby Gaol. One visitor once saw the ghostly figures of 2 men hanging from a beam in the condemned room. It is believed that he saw the ghostly images of the Jones brothers who had committed suicide in their cell. Sir Richard once saw a grey misty shape form in the ticket office. The shape transformed into a human shape before disappearing. The ticket office used to be the corridor leading to the garden where the hangings took place. The prisoners would have made their final walk through this corridor. Thank you for watching. We upload new episodes every other day. Subscribe to join the haunted journey.